Hey everybody, this is Philip from Questus. We're going to get started right at the 12 o'clock hour in about 1 minute. You can see a Q&A section as well as the chat section. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves and share insights in the chat section. But if you want to ask either myself or any one of our other hosts, which I'll introduce in a second, feel free to use the Q&A section. Those questions come directly to us. They can be anonymous. We'd love to answer your questions throughout the presentation, as well as we have a dedicated time at the end. So we'll get started here in about 30 more seconds. Feel free to share this with those who may have a time to just jump on or want to catch the recording later. If they register for it, we'll know we can send them the recording afterwards. We'll get started in about 30 seconds. See you soon. Hey, everybody. It is now 12 p.m. Eastern, and so we're going to get started with a kind of a different format of a webinar that we typically do aimed at the employer. This one is about understanding the impact of inflation. But first, by way of introduction, let me just show you who's on the call. My name is Philip Pinkney. I am the Vice President of Sales and Customer Success, so I have the privilege of managing the entire customer lifecycle. I'll be presenting along with Kimberly. Kimberly is one of our esteemed coaches. She's going to be walking us through the some of the content today, sharing some of the stories as she's actively meeting with employees who are affected by this, and so her insights are going to be valuable. I thought it'd be helpful. We're going to talk about a lot of data, a lot of facts. But it might be helpful to get to know us a little bit better. And so we're going to share a quick fun fact about ourselves. And feel free to do so in the chat as well. But a fun fact about me is, although I've been in sales for a very long time, when I was like 7 years old, the first career that I really wanted to be was a magician when I grew up. So magic thing didn't work out, but I'm here now with you. Kimberly, you have a fun fact to share?
So I was thinking about this last night. When my husband will turn on a movie, I know from the beginning song what it is. So I think my fun fact is I'm really good at figuring out what the movie is before it even starts, just based on the soundtrack. So I don't know if that's a flex or not.
That is actually pretty impressive. I'm not mad at that. Oh, man. And thanks for sharing, Kimberly. Once again, you're going to hear a lot more from her throughout the presentation. So as some of you may realize, that the CPI report, the Consumer Price Index report, is published every year, came out a few days ago. And so inflation, the cost of living, and just the cost of products and consumer goods has been a topic of lots of conversation. And so we're going to just start off by just sharing some baseline of information to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. We're going to share some highlights from that report. Many of you may not have had a chance to read the whole thing just yet. Then we're going to talk about employee sentiment and how that might be a little bit different from the facts. And then we're going to give you some tips on what you can do to help your employees through this time. So let's talk about some essential knowledge, and this is just some facts to get us going. One, inflation is the general rise in prices over time. So a simple way to look at it is just what does a basket of groceries cost today versus last year, that same basket of groceries. And it's measured by the Consumer Price Index, which measures the rise and fall of consumer price goods. And it does year to year and month to month comparisons. What might be really interesting to note is that inflation technically is not any higher than it has been historically. We're going to talk about kind of the differences in perception and reality. But inflation is typically 3.3 to 3.4% year over year. Now, you can see in some categories that number is way higher, like auto insurance is way up in our 12-month inflation scale. Some like things like rent and housing is rising faster than the cost of inflation. But just about everything is at that 3.3% or below when it comes to what things are actually costing. And so it's just important to just get a baseline that inflation is just a naturally occurring thing. over time, but it's usually measurable. It's usually equitable across multiple categories. And so, um, what do we know from this report that just came out this year? On June 12th, I believe the report was released. What kind of insights can we draw from that? One is inflation rose 3.3% from a year earlier, which is honestly statistically right on target with where what inflation should be and what it should be rising. The monthly rate remained unchanged. Gasoline, new vehicles, auto insurance, and air prices actually fell. So those numbers, once again, this is countrywide. In your particular region, it might be a little different, but nationwide, the average price of those things actually fell. And one of the big things is that medical care and housing prices remain higher than the rise of inflation. So those goods and services remain higher than the 3.3% rise year over year. So those are some of the big highlights from last year. Now, those are the numbers. And the numbers say overall, inflation is not that bad. 3.3, 3.4%, with the exception of housing and medical care. Most products either remained the same, kept up with inflation, or actually fell in cost. But as we all know, that's not necessarily what people feel right now. And so before we go to the next slide, for those who are in the call, I would love just kind of get your analysis of what's happening around you. And so a survey is going to pop up here shortly, here in a second. That's just going to ask you, hey, if you're in HR, CFO, if you're in management, how do you think your employees feel about inflation? If you're not in management and you're an employee, feel free to answer the question personally. But Brian, if you want to go ahead and pop that poll up, just go ahead and take a second to see, okay, for you personally, if you're an employee or if you're in management at all, if you're in HR, particularly CFO, CEO, how do you think your employees are doing, and how concerned are they with inflation? And so that's popping up. Feel free to answer that in time. So here's the reality. Although the numbers say things aren't that bad, inflation hasn't gone crazy, except for housing costs, which is rent, mortgages, rates, those kinds of things. Overall, the consumer price index says things are about normal. That's not what people are feeling. Look at that dark blue box says that over 55% are very concerned that inflation is impacting their finances. 33 are somewhat concerned. So we have around 90% of people saying that there is real concern around the cost of goods. Kimberly, you're an active coach, meeting with people regularly. Have you seen that in some of the conversations you've had?
Yes. It's never really stated as inflation because like you said, inflation's fairly normal in a regular economy. It's just kind of year to year happening already. But because of some of the really large increases we've seen, sticker shock at the store over what feels like a short amount of time, it's mentioned to me with clients more like my money is going less far. I don't have the money I used to have to be able to do the things I used to do. And one thing that I had a client recently tell me that I thought was really interesting was that looking at the statistics you've shared, it doesn't seem like this should have been an issue for this client, but their fridge went out and they had to buy a new fridge. And the issue was not so much that the fridge was very expensive, because actually, I know you're going to share some more information on this. Appliances aren't necessarily higher right now as far as costs go. But this particular client was feeling so strapped by all of the other increases in utility costs and higher interest rate because they were a somewhat new homeowner, and they were experiencing all these other inflationary pressures that ended up making this fridge just the icing on the cake for them as far as being able to cover it. And they had an emergency fund, which was great, that they used to cover that. But otherwise, they would have been a little strapped there.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great example. I had a fridge go out and it's a hassle. You got to buy new groceries if you didn't catch it in time. It not only ruins your day, but if you don't have that emergency fund, then it could be a real financial crisis. Because where are you going to get the money? Because fridges are not cheap, and so where are you going to get that money from if you haven't saved or put some things aside? And I love how you talk about the inflationary pressures, right? Like this is kind of this pervasive sense of stress that employees are feeling, because there's two different things that people are feeling right now. People are feeling inflation, which is moderate. It does happen. but they're also feeling just the rising cost of things, right? And so what private companies charge for milk, eggs, and other things are set by themselves. And so there is some rising costs happening that not at all related to inflation, but people are feeling it all the same. And for most of them, it just means like their paycheck is smaller, or it's not going as far, or they just don't have enough money to the end of the month. And so when you look at what kind of financial issues cause people the most stress, you can see year over year from 2022, which is kind of a pandemic year. You would expect that that would be a high stress year, but actually 2023, those concerns went up in just about every single category and didn't go down in any category. And so concern around having savings in case of emergency, like that refrigerator that went out. 47% of people last year, right? Over half of Americans are worried about, man, I don't have enough money if something happens, or if I get a flat tire, if my kid gets sick, or if my roof starts to leak, I don't know where that money is coming from. And then almost half of folks are worried about just paying their monthly bills. This isn't, if an emergency happens, this isn't going on vacation or doing anything extra. This is just maintaining my life as it is now is one of the number top three concerns for almost half of those folks who are working. And so these are just shocking numbers, gone up significantly even from the year before. And so I don't know, Kimberly, I'm sure you have lots of stories around stress related to anything to share when it comes to just how people feel around these types of things.
Yeah, looking at these numbers, it's really interesting how spot on it is with the kind of sessions I have. A lot of it is surrounding um, how do I save for an emergency fund when I can barely cover my bills? This is
Mm-hmm.
a real issue, and these are things that are top of mind for a lot of people that I meet with. There are ways coaches can help you get creative with that, and we do that. That's what we do, and we like to help with that. But it is tough when your costs just continue to go up, and you don't really know how to like budget for that when you're not sure when those costs are going to go up and how much they're going to go up. It is even more important than to have an emergency fund, and people know that and they're stressed about it. So I think that's really reflective of the clients I'm seeing, and this is all balanced by other longer term goals that people have. So they still want to be
Mm-hmm.
saving for retirement, and you can see that here. They still have debt that they want to pay off. Maybe they want to buy a home, or they have all of these different kind of mid long term goals that they're having a hard time getting to because they're
Mm-hmm.
focused on the day to day. So coaches really like to help with the strategy there. But yeah, I see this a lot, and I think it's a really great opportunity to have a conversation with someone who's a third party, not in the thick of it with you, like a
Yeah,
coach, because they have a little bit more perspective from an outsider's view, if you will.
absolutely. Absolutely. So clearly, we've seen that the stress levels are high, even though the numbers, once again, outside of housing, which affects just about everybody, and outside of medical costs, the cost of most consumer goods have remained relatively stable compared to inflation. But that's not what people are feeling, right? People are feeling their paychecks getting smaller. They're feeling like they have less options. They're feeling like they can't think about the future because they need to worry about today. Um, and it's really impacting people in the workplace. And so these are just some stats from CFO.com. You can find these stats just about everywhere because it's pretty pervasive that financial stress is affecting people at work. It's affecting how they pursue their career goals, their productivity. There's one stat that I saw that the average American spends about 14 hours a week worrying about money, which is about a part-time job, right? That they're just spent worrying about money, trying to get payment arrangements, trying to find access to credit, trying to, kind of crowdsource, emergency expenses from family and friends, those kinds of things. And so we see that number here. You look at the bottom left here, that 14 hours a week, 8.5 of those hours per week are done during the workday, right? 9 to 5 when, the utility companies are open and when they're able to make some calls. And so not only is it affecting people, but it's really affecting companies. And I want to show this stat because aside from inflation, aside from the rising cost of goods and consumer goods, there's also just this pervasive financial stress that's taking hold of folks. 78% of employees live paycheck to paycheck, right? That's almost 8 out of 10 folks. If they missed one paycheck, they would be in financial ruin, or they don't have any savings whatsoever, enough to cover a $500 or $1,000 emergency expense like that refrigerator that Kimberly mentioned. The bottom right number there, that 28% of employees run out of money in between paychecks, right? So not only are they not even saving, they're worried about covering their expenses month to month. And maybe they're using credit more than they used to have or making payment arrangements. But more and more, again, the top right number, employees are looking for their employer to help. And so we talked about inflation, the rising cost of goods. We talked about stress. We talked about, how people are just kind of living day to day. And now we're talking about, okay, what can employers do to help? If you're in management, you're in HR, CFO, CEO, what can you do to help your people? Because ultimately, without them, the business fails. So we've kind of gathered some ideas on ways that you can support your employees during the season. And a big one is offering student loan debt relief. There's lots of programs available. There's lots of ways you can partner with your employees. We encourage you to speak with your benefits broker or your company attorney, your HR departments to find out, okay, how can we come alongside, what percent of our population, especially if you have a younger age workforce, student loan payments and debt is a big concern for them. So not only can it help your current employees, but if you have a student loan debt relief benefit, that can be something to help attract and attain the best talent out there. Another one is helping with day-to-day expenses. This one is sneakily good because there's lots of ways that you can do this. One example is childcare. A lot of folks are paying for daycare, paying for childcare, and if you've ever had to do that, it is very expensive. And so, what can you do? Well, a lot of daycares will offer corporate discounts just by asking for it. So if a representative from the company reaches out and says, hey, we have a lot of our employees coming from that side of town, would you be willing to offer a 10, 15% discount if they brought their children to your center? Or find out what centers your employees are already taking and just reach out to them. Most daycare centers will be willing to offer a discount for no other reason than you just asked. So that's one example of day-to-day expenses support. You can also do gas cards and gift cards and those kinds of things to help people, especially those who are commuting into work. Which leads to another way you can support your employees is offering flexible work arrangements. So for some employers, the days of completely remote is gone, and they wanted everybody back in the office for various reasons. But even offering a hybrid schedule, where you maybe get 1 or 2 days where you can work from home or half days, those things like that, they don't have to come, at 9 a.m. in the morning and sit in traffic for an hour and a half, which burns gas and burns time. And again, for the daycare folks, they have to leave even earlier to drop the child off for daycare, then to make it to the office at 9. And so even a late day start for some employees, they could work, come in a little bit later, stay a little bit later, or have a day off or hybrid work schedules. These things may seem like small impacts to you, but for those folks who are that 78% of folks who are kind of living paycheck to paycheck, to save $50 a week in gas or $100 a week in childcare expenses, or have the time back, from not sitting in traffic, these could be life-changing benefits. So, and of course, we got to put increased salaries on here. And I know what you're thinking, right? If we could, we would. But this could be a chance to really do some research and say, hey, are we really paying a wage that's comparable to other employees in other companies doing the same type of work? This could be a good time to do a compensation study. This could be a good time to kind of look at the wages for existing employees, see if it's keeping on track with the new employees that you're hiring. And so this could be ways to gather some research to make sure that you remain competitive. And also, there's been some new legislation. This is a big one here. So if you haven't been tuning in just yet, tune in now, because this is Secure Act 2.0 was passed, and there's lots of information in there. There's lots of benefits to employers and employees. For example, Section 110 of the Secure Act says that employers can use the student loan payments that an employee is making and count that as a 401k contribution, which they can match. And so let me explain that again. There's a lot of employees who, instead of saving for retirement, they're just paying off their student loans because they don't feel like they can do both. The Secure Act 2.0, Section 110 says that if an employee is making a student loan payment, the employer can say, okay, we will count that as a 401k contribution and match it as if it was. So if you have a 6% match for employee A, in order to get that 6%, that 3% match, they have to contribute, let's just say $500 a month. And let's say they're making a $250 payment towards their student loans. Well, you can count that $250 as a $250 contribution to their 401k and match it up to the level that it's supposed to be. So this is a great benefit that employees don't have to feel like they have to choose between taking care of their debt today and also planning for tomorrow. And for employers, they can make sure that their employees feel valued and have a retirement plan. Once again, all those things help retention, it helps recruiting, all those other things. So this is legislation that's already passed. So if you're curious, definitely find out more. But these things are on the table, available to help your employees today. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about one of the most impactful benefits that you can offer during this time is a financial wellness benefit. So here at Questus, we are a financial wellness company, and we provide two things. One, we provide unlimited coaches to all of your employees, and we provide award-winning software. And so, but there's lots of options out there. If you're looking for a financial wellness company, the benefit is improved money management behavior. Right? Giving more people more money is great, but it won't solve people's behavior if they're chronically and consistently spending more than they make, if they don't have a good relationship with money, if they don't understand it. So improved money management behavior is one of the benefits of using a financial wellness benefit. And there's also measurable changes in savings, debt balance, and credit scores. Now, what that means for the employee is they feel like they have more money left over, right? They spend less money, so it feels like their paycheck got bigger because less and less of it is going towards high interest debt specifically. Um, and so here's a little bit more about the way we do it. Once again, award-winning software, unlimited coaching. Kimberly is one of our coaches. A lot of the stories that she's shared has come from real life examples of people. And so let's pause here for a second and say, Kimberly, do we have a success story, for example, of how you've been able to meet with someone and seen some tangible improvement, even during hard times like this?
Yeah, I have a few. I have a lot more than a few, but I'll keep it short. Two top of mind that I can think of recently. One was that I had a regular client who had some debt repayment they wanted to do, but they didn't quite have enough of an emergency fund going to feel secure in increasing the debt repayment. And so we came to a conclusion, a kind of strategy of how to kind of buffer that emergency fund while still paying a little bit more toward the debt payoff. Well, what ended up happening for this client is that they had a job loss in their family.
Mm.
And it ended up being that they were really, really happy that we had prioritized building that emergency fund, even though that client initially came to me saying, I really, really want to get rid of this credit card debt that I have, and I've had it for a while, but they were already paying toward it and they were doing such great progress. But I just thought when I looked at their emergency fund that, hey, you might want to consider buffering that, just because if you don't have that and something happens, you have an emergency of some kind, then you're going to have to fall back on that credit card again. And that's not going to feel good for you. So we ended up doing the emergency fund, and they ended up having that when there was a job loss in their family. And they were so happy they had it. They actually scheduled a session with me just to tell me how happy they were that we had done that instead. And
Yeah.
they felt like they had their ducks in a row because we really prioritized that. And it was 3 months of expenses, and they had been saving more and more. And it was a great feeling to know that I had had that impact on somebody and I could see it, and they were just so overwhelmingly happy about it. Um,
Yes.
but there was
Oh man,
another one that,
that's a
oh,
great one. Go ahead.
sorry.
No, I love to keep the stories coming. We need some wins. We need some good news in right now. So come on.
I know it's true. Well, and the other one that I can think of is a little different. This has to do more with retirement saving. And so this person was pretty aggressively saving for retirement and wanted to put more into their 401k. They were also considering Roth IRAs, and there was a lot of complexity there as far as where they wanted their money to go. But again, the emergency fund was a little maybe lower on their priority list. And as financial coaches, we want to encourage what goals you have. So that's really important to us. We want to talk about what you value saving for and spending on. And so what we were able to do for this client was we said, well, let's continue to prioritize saving for retirement, but let's also balance that with emergency fund saving. And how do we find that money? well, this person had a really high housing cost, rent. And so they decided, after figuring out what was possible if they had a lower rent, they actually decided not to re-up their lease because they realized, well, that's not actually something I value spending money on. I value spending money on building an emergency fund and building toward my retirement. And that was a decision they made based on us going through their spending trends and looking in the platform at how they were doing month to month on their different spending to find that money in the form of reducing their rent. And so I felt like that was just such a win for this person because that was something they came to the conclusion on their own through coaching and also the platform.
Oh, that's great story. Let me just highlight two quick takeaways from both of those stories because they're amazing. Um, we talked about inflation and we talked about employee sentiment. And so the numbers say, hey, things are a little bit rough in some areas, but overall things are about where they should be predictably year over year. But that's not how employees are feeling. And that's not the whole truth because there is some cost of rising goods. And so sometimes people feel overwhelmed in their finances. They feel like they've only got a limited options until they sit and talk with someone. And so realize, okay, maybe I have a couple more options than I realized, or maybe the things that I think were important maybe should be prioritized along with these just good, assets of financial wealth and financial health, like emergency fund. Having 3 months expenses doesn't sound like a really attractive thing that most people are thinking about, but that can be the difference between, sanity and insanity when something goes wrong, or stress and peace when something goes wrong. And so having that outside voice to be able to speak truth and walk alongside you, those are amazing stories. So let me do a recap, and then we're going to answer some of the questions that have come in. So if you haven't had a chance to ask questions, please do that now. That's coming up here in a few minutes. So once again, many are concerned about the rising cost of inflation. And the big impact for companies is the financial stress. It really impacts your people. When you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills, when you're worried about how you're going to buy groceries, there's really nothing else that you can think about fully. There's really nothing else that you can give your attention to. And there's some truth behind the rising cost of goods. Inflation is kind of holding steady, but housing costs are increasing, medical costs are increasing, and the cost of some consumer goods are increasing. And so people are feeling that, and they just feel like their paycheck is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, even though they're working harder than ever. And so there are some things that you, the employer, can do. We talked about ways to just help people with gas cards, grocery gift cards, childcare expenses, student loan relief, especially that Secure Act 2.0. If you don't take anything else away from us, one of the two things I want you to take away is that there's legislation to help both employees and employers. Please speak to your legal counsel, your HR professionals about to learn more about that. Particularly that Section 110, where people can make payments towards their student loans and get the benefit of a retirement contribution match. And so that's the best of both worlds. It's an amazing benefit that's already in place today. And of course, programs like financial wellness to help people feel more confident, get the answers they need, not be sold any products whatsoever, but really feel like they've got someone in their corner to make a little bit, take a little bit of this insanity or the craziness that they feel around finances and make it make sense. And so this is the Q&A time. So there's going to be a quick survey that pops up, but let me address one of the questions that came in. What if an employee does not pay for college for children? This sounds discriminatory if you don't have children in college. So I believe this question is around offering a student loan benefit. Okay, is it discriminatory against people who don't have student loans or don't have children in college? No, benefits typically aren't discriminatory. There's just people who are eligible for it, and there's people who are not eligible for it. And so once again, I advise you to talk to your legal counsel to find out the nuances there. But for example, if someone is on their parents' health insurance, right, because you can be on their parents' health insurance a little bit longer now. So if you have a 22, 23-year-old employee on, someone's on their parents' health insurance, the company offering their own health insurance isn't discriminatory against that person just because they're not eligible or don't want to take advantage of it. And so benefits are perks and bonuses for those who are eligible, for those who would like to take advantage of it. Companies don't have to take, employees, don't have to take advantage of any benefits. And so these are all optional things. Once again, have a conversation with your legal counsel to learn the nuances there. But offering a benefit that 100% of the people aren't eligible for typically is not discriminatory because very few benefits are going to be inclusive of 100% of your population. So Um, we had one question. We talked about what employers can do. This person is not in management or HR, and they said, "Hey, what can I do to fight inflation?" Well, if you're not in management, if you're an employee working at a company, you're feeling the pinch. Honestly, getting those financial behaviors under control. There's only so much you can do because we live in a world that we don't control all the variables. But as Kimberly said, getting that emergency fund, right? Getting that money saved up so that you can kind of weather the storms of uncertainty. Even if you put $50 a week away or $50 a month away, whatever it is, just begin saving for the eventual emergency, the eventual unexpected expense, those kinds of things. And so, if you want to learn more about personal financial management, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we do all day. We'd love to help and love to have a conversation about what you can personally and individually do. So there's going to be a survey that pops up, Brian. If you can go ahead and put that survey up, we'd love to know if this was helpful for you. We'd love to know, what this information was kind of what you were looking for. The Consumer Price Index survey says that rates are holding steady, says that inflation is average, but that's not the whole story. What people are feeling, the rising cost of goods, is making people feel like their paychecks are getting smaller. And if you're in management or leadership of a company, you're not stuck. There's things that you can do, very practical day-to-day things, changing some of your benefits, even changing the hybrid work schedules, and then offering a financial wellness benefit like Questus to come alongside and help your employees every step of the way. So if you want to learn more, feel free to go to our website, questus.co, or you can email sales@questus.co. And just with a question, we'll follow up with you immediately to make sure that you feel like you are giving your employees the best opportunity and the best chance to do well, even during uncertain times like now. So, Kimberly, any final words for the people before we let them go?
No, I think you said it all. I would really welcome any people who would like to meet with me as a coach to discuss the inflationary issues that person asked about, because there are creative ways we can work on feeling a little more confident about our day-to-day spending. So please reach out. I would love to talk to you.
Absolutely. Well, we are right at the 30-minute mark, and we want to respect everybody's time. I know many of you are hopping on for your lunch breaks, which we appreciate. For those who would like the recording, we will email that out here in the next few days. If you know someone should have been on here but missed it, feel free to reach out to us as well, and we'll make sure that they get the recording and we are able to connect with them as well. Thank you all for your questions and for participation. This is again Philip from Questus, Kimberly, one of our dynamic coaches, and we would love to talk to you again soon. Have a great day.